Thank you all for coming. It's great to see you all here. It's great to see there are so many people who are concerned about the relentless tide of coastal pollution around Thanet and the rest of East Kent. As well as, I just want to let you know, as well as there are a few, all of the 4 Green councillors are here, Abby, Becky, myself and Tricia. We've got Green councillor from Whitstable, Claire, and a number of other candidates. So if any of you want to talk to us after the meeting or ask any questions during it, you're more than welcome. Well, we're all really pleased that both Feargal and Jenny have agreed to join us tonight. This came out of I went to a meeting to hear Feargal talk in Rochester in December, and afterwards I grabbed him and said, "Oh, please could you come and talk to us in Thanet?" He said, "Well, if you can get Jenny Jones to come, I'll come along." So Jenny came along, and it's really, really brilliant. I'll just briefly, I won't say much because you want to hear them, but here, as we all become familiar here in Thanet, the regular sewage spills around the coast causing all sorts of damage, especially to our sites of special scientific interest. At Peggrog Bay, Jenny and myself went out and had a look, and Andy went out and had a look with Nick Mitchell, who's here, and showed us some of the damage that's happening over there. And on top of the sewage spills, now we're also having to get used to regular water outages, which have affected a significant number of residents and businesses, some of whom have had to go without water for days at a time. So it's clear to most of us that Southern Water's infrastructure, both dealing with the sewage and delivering us clean water, is not up to scratch. It's not fit for purpose. So I'm sure we'll get on to talk about that as the meeting progresses. But the way we're going to run this tonight, firstly, Jenny Jones is going to say a few words, and then I'll pass over to Feargal, and then we'll take some Q&As. Okay, so thank you very much. So I'll hand over to you, Jenny. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I only wanted to say a couple of things very briefly before Feargal takes the floor. Can you hear me at the back? Can you put your hand up if you can hear me? Thank you. First, I would like to say that I offer Feargal all the political heft and credibility that he doesn't have. But unfortunately that isn't true. I am actually his puppet in the House of Lords. And he has other puppets as well. The Duke of Wellington is one of his puppets, and quite a few of us do his bidding. And if I often intervene in business in the House of Lords and have a go at the ministers about sewage and water abstraction, agricultural runoff and all these things. But virtually all my information comes from Feargal. So if I see a question coming up, I email Feargal, and within a couple of hours I get 2 pages of information back that I can use as evidence. So I'm happy to answer questions afterwards about sewage, but quite honestly, you are really better directing your questions about sewage to Feargal. And if you want to ask me anything about the House of Lords, then that's really my forte. So I'm going to hand over to the expert, Feargal Sharkey.
Thank you, even to those of you in the cheap seats at the back. See, Jenny, and thank you for that extraordinary introduction, because Jenny's just perfectly illustrated a kind of rebalancing I'm having to adjust to in my life. On the way from the train station, we were just chatting. I've had this glorious adult life since I was 18, 19 years old. For decades, random people would walk up to me and want to talk to me about music. I could drive out of London on a Sunday afternoon, find myself down by the marina with an ice cream, and somebody in Ramsgate would walk up and want to talk about music and records and gigs they'd been to, and John Peel and all kinds of stuff. Now, for an artist and a musician and a songwriter, what a more glorious, glorious thing to say. Unbelievably flattering thing. But here's the strange part. Over the last 2 years, nobody wants to talk to me about music anymore. Now everybody wants to talk to me about shouting. What have I done? I cannot recall being that bad in my life. I went to confession endlessly. The truth is, I foolishly, many decades ago, found myself in the clutches of an education system in Ireland called the Christian Brothers. See, funny you should say that. Well, the truth is, from my perspective, there was a very simple psychology involved. If you thought that school finished at 3:30, you were insane. If you thought your weekends were your own, absolutely not anymore. For the next 6 years, you were ours, and this is what's going to happen. And part of that induction was, here is a long list of after-school clubs, societies that you have to take part in. And you have to volunteer for 6. And if you don't volunteer, we will volunteer you. So Sharkey being the skinny, and by the way, this is me in the full fledged of middle-age spread. You can imagine me 11 years old, I'm built like a pencil. And of course, I look at Gaelic football, tick. Hurling, which for those of you that aren't Irish, involves 30 teenagers with 3 feet of ash in their hands, battering each other over the head. And of course I go, tick. That sounds like a good idea. Debating society. You'd never spot it, would you? And extraordinarily, I ticked 2 of the boxes, 1 marked fly fishing and 1 marked fly tying. And here I am, 50 years later, and I'm now chairman of the oldest fly fishing club in the planet, called the Elmo Magna Fishery. And last Saturday, I had the incredible pleasure of chairing the 182nd AGM of the Elmo Magna Fishery. Now, we own 2.5 miles of river in Hertfordshire, Chalk Street. There's only 225 in the entire planet. These are incredibly rare, delicate little rivers. But here's the disappointing part, 85% of them are here in southern England. And we are in the process of destroying every single one of them. To such an extent, when I became chairman 6-7 years ago, within a matter of weeks I found myself, as Jenny will appreciate, sitting in an environment agency meeting room in the middle of Hertfordshire with 40 people in the room, and as Jenny knows, I have the patience of a gnat. Within about 10 seconds my brain engaged and I suddenly thought, you guys just sit here and talk humongous amounts of shite. And you just do this endlessly. And you keep doing this for year after year after year. And I'm not going to tolerate this. So we went away and we then just took the Environment Agency to the High Court. It involved 2.5 miles of the last bit of the River Lee, which still has a breeding population of wild brown trout that swam across Doggerland 8,000 years ago. It swam into the River Thames, took a right turn at Limehouse, swam up the River Lee, and 8,000 years later their descendants are still in that 2.5 mile stretch of river. Which is why we were determined, and have been for 182 years, to defend it. Now, I say this lovingly about the 60 members of the Elmo Magna Fishery. They're ladies and gentlemen of a certain age, with a really bad attitude. They're cantankerous, they're awkward, they're bloody-minded, and they're far too used to getting their own way in life. So not only did I find myself standing in Fleet Street, heading into the High Court, I was banging furiously and loudly on the doors at 7 o'clock in the morning, demanding to be let in. We resolved our issue with the EA. And I'm pleased to say there are more wild brown trout in the Elmo Magna Fishery than there's been for decades, and it's all fine. But as I explained to the then chair of the EA, that experience kind of made me curious as to why 60 ladies and gentlemen of a certain age had to take the Environment Agency to the High Court simply to get them to do the right thing. And I was just puzzled by it. That gave me an itch. Stupidly, naively, foolishly, 6 years ago I scratched that bloody itch. And every time I scratch that itch, I just end up with a bigger itch. So it turned out, simply just looking and trying to protect this little population of a couple of thousand wild birds has now turned into this incredibly crazy, lunatic national campaign that I had no intention of embarking on. I retired 10 years ago. I was minding my own business, and here I am out in Rams getting a bloody Friday night talking about shit. The truth is, what I uncovered and what I slowly unpicked, we now live in a world where there is not a single river in England currently in good overall environmental health. Every single river in England is polluted. Two of the biggest sources of that pollution is the water industry and agriculture. As I stand here, there is but 14% of rivers in England in good ecological status. 14%. That was 25% 10 years ago. DEFRA's current estimate, as Jenny knows, DEFRA loves nothing more than about 5 o'clock on Thursday afternoon before Christmas, which fell on a Sunday this year. And of course, we all worked on the Friday before Christmas, didn't we really? 5 o'clock in the afternoon, DEFRA quietly published a little report. The current forecast by 2027, just 6% of rivers in England will be in good ecological status. The ecology and the health of our rivers is falling off a cliff. As it turns out, in the centre of all of that is a system that we put our trust in, unknowingly, unwittingly. We thought that we elect these politicians who form governments, who create departments like the Department for the Environment, who act on our behalf and look after, protect and nurture and secure the environment for us and for our children and the children of our children's children. Turns out, politically, none of that was going on whatsoever. Beneath that is a system of regulation called Ofwat and the Environment Agency. Turns out, God knows what the hell they've been doing for the last 30 years. And it turns out, back in 2012, and it doesn't matter what your local MP tells you, 2012, this government was taken to the European Court by the EU Commission. And this government was found guilty of breaching the legislation by illegally allowing water companies to dump sewage into the environment in the UK. Now you'll hear people talking about heavy rain. The court looked at it. It's illegal. So no matter what your local MP says, no matter what the water company says, the European Court of Justice ruled you are not supposed to be dumping sewage into the environment during heavy rain. In fact, you're not supposed to be doing it at all, full stop, amen. Apart from what the court referred to as exceptional situations. Now before you start, what the court means by that is an event so rare and so unique that no rational, reasonable human being could ever predict it and have planned for it and prevented it happening should it ever arise. In the old days, what I would have called an act of God or force majeure. But here's the odd thing, as Jenny knows, I've made myself very unpopular with a number of government backbenchers. I have to tell you, on the 26th of August last year, this government legalised the dumping of sewage into the environment for at least the next 28 years. All a water company now has to do is argue that they're doing something, and my applause to Jenny and the Duke of Wellington, because the House of Lords was the only thing standing up and trying to prevent government and stop this. But here's the thing. All a water company now has to do is argue that they're doing something to reduce the adverse impacts. There's no definition of what reduction looks like. Is that a teacup full? A saucepan full? A swimming pool full? And what the hell is an adverse impact, and how do I recognise it when I see it? So the simple truth of the matter is, there's now an awful lot of government backbenchers out there, absolutely furious, because they've now worked it out. They got played by their own government, and they got used. So the truth is, we are now in a position where 3 weeks ago, the Times, the Sunday Times, now launched a national campaign to clean it up, to clean up our rivers, clean up our beaches, clean up the environment. Promptly followed by the newspaper, promptly followed by the New Statesman. And I have reason to believe that there may be a national tabloid about to join that little consortium very quickly over the next few days. So the simple truth of the matter is, we have gone from a situation where I sat on my sofa 6 years ago, starting up a Twitter account with absolutely nobody paying any attention to what I had to say whatsoever, knowing full well and explaining to Mrs. Sharkey, I may end up just shouting at the moon in the garden on a Friday night and no one paying the blindest bit of interest. Well, I now have to tell you, 24 hours ago I was having a bunch of people with meetings in Downing Street. In the last 3 days alone there has been 3 separate debates in Parliament, 2 in the House of Commons, 1 in the House of Lords, all involving water, and right now the national media is out there outraged and people are utterly fed up. It's horrific, it's despicable, and if you want to change the environment, you've now got an opportunity, and it's the only one you're going to have in your lifetime. The next 2 years, the next election is going to be vital. If you want a beach that the children of your children's children can go on to paddle and play without fear, without interference, it's up to you. The future's now in your hands. I wish you good luck with it. My name is Feargal Sharkey. May your God go with you.
Thank you very much, Feargal. I'm sure that was really moving. There's a lot there. I'm sure lots of people would like to ask 1 or 2 questions. Maybe if anyone wants to ask a question of either Feargal or make a point about anything. Well, Nick, I'll go.
How many grades are there in the status of our rivers?
Well, listen, I'm going to stand up for this because I like to see people when I'm talking to them. Here's where we are, and this is when it comes back to what Jenny and the crossbenchers in the House of Lords and stuff, and what they're working on right now, and over the next 8 months, 9 months, it's going to be so utterly vital. All of the environment law in this country comes from Europe. The nucleus and the foundation of it is a thing called the Water Framework Directive. And that measures the health of water, rivers, lakes, the aquifer under the ground that ends up coming into your tap. It measures it using 2 sets of criteria. One is the chemical makeup. We now know that every river in the country fails a chemical test. And that government, again, the Thursday before Christmas, when we were all orcs and paying attention at 5 o'clock and nobody was at an office party, nobody was trying to get to the top as quickly as they could and forget about life. Government quietly announced it that the chemical thresholds and the chemical dates and deliveries they had, which was supposed to be 2027, they've now quietly pushed back to 2063. It's out there, you can go look it up. Google is your friend. The other test that's applied is the ecological status. Now that's looking at plants, birds, insects, invertebrates, wildlife, fish, population, species, densities, everything else. As we speak, 86% of rivers fail the ecology test. And that is on course that will go down to 6% by 2027. Now, the way the framework's directed is set up, if you fail any of those tests, you fail the whole thing. And it's very robust. The original purpose was that by 2027, now this was a law enacted in this country in 2003, by 2027, 100% of water bodies, rivers, lakes, aquifer, would be in good ecological status by 2027, and we're now on course because of budget cuts and contemptuous complacency on behalf of this government, we're now down to 6% if we're lucky by 2027. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's it. Who's doing the testing?
That's the Environment Agency when they have the funding to do it. Here's how the sequence of events works. God, when you get bored with this stuff, you can all run from this room, by the way, screaming loudly, or we can all just go to the pub. Clearly, government is funded in these 5 yearly cycles, called the Comprehensive Spending Review. And there was one in 2010. You may remember the age of austerity and the banking system collapsing and all that kind of stuff. Now, the Environment Agency's budget was culled like everybody else's. That's just the world we were in. Fast forward 5 years later, when you get another chance, because we're now in the new budget cycle, it turns out that the then Secretary of State cut the bit of the Environment Agency's budget that deals with the environment. Monitoring, measuring, sanctioning, going after transgressors, flag tippers, polluters and everything else. The then Secretary of State for the environment cut that bit of the agency's budget by 57%.
Wow.
Now, as someone who's run some quite big companies over the years, I can tell you right now, you do not cut any organisations by 57%. You are blatantly, deliberately, willfully setting out to decapitate and cripple that organisation. The very same Secretary of State that year, it's out there, you can look it up, stood up in Parliament and bribed two backbenchers about how she had cut farm inspections by 34,000 that year and had cut farming red tape by 80%. Step forward, future Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Liz Truss. Turns out she had a dry run in 2015 involving the Environment Agency and none was noticed.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So the Environment Agency has been utterly decapitated since 2015. Now, that said, and Jenny knows, I then move on to, and I want to be clear about this, when I meet people from the EA that are the infantry, that are standing in rivers wearing dry suits, without exception, they're incredibly brilliant, decent people trying really hard under furiously difficult circumstances to do the right thing. But when you get to the board and the senior management, they're complacent, they're incompetent, they're mediocre at best, and they need a complete overhaul, and the whole thing needs to be totally dismantled and reshaped.
Yeah.
And they are, and it's an old phrase, but it is true in the case of the EA, when you get to the people on the ground that are standing on your beach taking samples, they are genuinely lions being led by donkeys.
Yeah. I had an incident with the Environment Agency and I filmed heavily polluted black road runoff going into the nature reserve.
Yeah.
And I followed it up with the Environment Agency, and it ended up being a case where the Environment Agency recommended that I build a reed bed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was told to do.
Yeah. Go, Jenny.
Feargal alluded to this, and the fact is things are going to get worse because there's a piece of legislation going through at the moment. We're dealing with it in the House of Lords. Things go back and forth between the Commons and the Lords. It's called the Retained EU Law Bill, and it's all about stripping out from our legislation all the stuff that was put in when we were members of the EU. Now, a lot of that is environmental protection, a lot of it is workers' rights protection, civil liberties protection. It is going to be a disaster. One of the weirdest things I've found in the last couple of years, because I've been in the House of Lords for 10 years now, and so I've been through a few changes, and I'm quite active on Twitter, and at first people used to always moan at me about how awful the House of Lords are, and how we all fall asleep on red benches, and things like that. And in the last couple of years it's changed, because the House of Lords has actually found, I don't know, motivation, a backbone, whatever you want to call it. And part of this is the sewage debate, the environmental debate, when we stayed up until the early hours of the morning, actually defeating the government time after time. And part of it was the sewage debate with the Duke of Wellington and so on. And we now are the sort of last backstop in trying to protect civil liberties, human rights and so on, because the government is so keen to strip them all out. It wants to stop any opposition, any sort of dissent, and it's managing it because we can't stop it permanently. Anyway, I've got a copy of the briefing on the retained EU law bill here. This is only a briefing, but it's twice as thick as most briefings. And when you get a list of the amendments, there are 500 amendments that are going through the House of Lords. This is unheard of, absolutely unheard of, but we are so desperate to try to stop the worst excesses. And to some extent, we won't be able to, but the next elections are going to be critical, because what we hope is that if Labour gets in, they might start repealing the worst aspects of this bill. So I thought I'd throw this in while we're sort of on the sort of downslope. At some point, we're going to talk about solutions. Well, Feargal is going to talk about solutions. and so I thought this was a good moment to tell you how awful it's going to get.
Great, yeah. Yes. Sorry, I don't know.
Laura, thank you.
Helen.
Mike, and thank you very much for what you're doing. So I guess my question is, parking the general elections one side being the obvious beacon of hope, you know, what's your advice for what ordinary folk can do? You know, because of course, writing to our local MP is entirely quite good at writing letters in Thanet. We've got form. What advice can you give us in terms of what we can do?
Well, I know that some people have stopped paying their bills to Southern Water. Now, Feargal probably knows more about that than I do. And they don't seem, at the moment, to be suing them for the bills. And so that's a real start. But it's got to operate at every level. I understand you're probably tired of writing letters, but actually every letter does count, because it sends a signal to your MP that this is something a lot of people care about. So it is worth writing a letter. And if you belong to any organisation, send the letter round so that they can all send it to their MPs in different places and so on. I think Save Our Seas wants to come in on this. Are you one of the people not paying your bill?
I am, but Save Our Seas doesn't officially. Sorry, I'm in labour for that, so it's Whitstable. Just
Go for it, Wayne.
if it's all right, a few things about what we can do, because we were just 10 people that went swimming in the sea. We all belong to the Blue Tits swimming group. I was quite new. Yeah, we were first all called 10 Tits Scared Shits, but so we made it a name for the press. But I'd got sick swimming in the sea twice. I'd only just moved to the area, and every time I went swimming, I was violently and terribly ill. And for someone with cancer, that's a quite serious matter. So other people were really angry about the public meeting that was held in the area by Southern, where they just dismissed women with their questions, like in most patronising ways, if people could not possibly understand economics here. It was appalling. Their arrogance is astounding, actually. It's astounding. And no wonder, because you know, when you think about when the Environment Agency were trying to do something about them, they took away papers out of their hands and locked them up and tore them up. All of that against the law. And while some of their lower people got prosecuted, the directors have got away scot-free and should have been jailed because they know they can get away. So we just thought, what can we do? There's 10 of us. What the hell can we begin to do? And we started organising local protests. And I won't go on for ages, but we started just doing little local things. We found the Duke of Westminster's amendment, and we thought, Wellington, sorry, this is dodgy. This is a bit dodgy because it's going to legitimise in a way by saying you have to keep cutting, but we also thought it might cause a political crisis. So we thought we'll support that with a petition. People wrote to their, the Lords. We asked people to write to ones with the same the first letter of their surname to lobby. But we started just going. We went to every single civil society that exists in Whitstable. We went to schools. We went to the Sea Scouts. We went to the Woodcraft folk, we went to the yacht club, we went all over and just made a local demo. And now it's really very strange because they have sent, I think, 3 different sets of people to try and charm us out of complaining. But our demos and protests get bigger all the time, and it's a real community campaign, and you can do that too. I mean, I went to your demo last year and it was absolutely brilliant, just keeping up that pressure. They meet us once a month and we're on our 3rd person. They just keep trying to calm us down. And it isn't working. And it's making people more angry, actually. And I think it's a direct reason why Claire, part of why you got elected in Whitstable, because people have had enough, and we can do that everywhere. You can do that. You can go to a school, you can talk to the parents, you can talk to the kids, you can get them doing projects. We've just got to get people constantly engaged and active, and it's an awful lot of fun, apart from anything else.
Something that is less fun, but useful. The government is currently consulting on revisions to the national planning framework, something we discussed last night at the council meeting in relation to building on greenfield sites. But there is a sneaky little section in this that's actually about water, pollution, climate change adaptation, so no point in writing to Craig because he knows that there's no such climate change, but we can fill in the response to this. It is a very tight turnaround. It closes, I think, next Thursday, but it's a great long piece of legislation that they're asking for comments on, but if you go to question 40, that's the one about the water. If you go to question 38, that's the one about the greenfield sites. If you want to make some comments, you just Google planning, national planning consultation, and it comes up, and you get a great long document, and you can literally just fill in your few sentences on those items and send it in. It is worth doing. Sarah?
Tricia, just to add to what you were saying, if people go to the Community Planning Alliance,
Yes.
they have got advice on how to respond and get heard on this consultation NPPF.
If everybody in this room sent a few sentences in, that would make a difference. I know it's a boring thing to do, but it really does make a difference if lots and lots of individuals all write in and say, we feel strongly about these things, you should be doing this, this and this. It may not make any difference, but it might. It's worth a try.
Okay, thank you, yes.
Yeah, if I could sort of raise an issue which is related to frontman.
Yeah, that's great.
It's about plastic. Plastic is, as I'm sure most of us are aware, a terrible pollutant, especially in rivers and seas. And at the moment, the UN are negotiating a plastic treaty. How many of us know about the plastic treaty here? How many have heard of it? Can we have a show of hands for how many people? A lot of people haven't, and I find a lot of people haven't really heard about it. But it's they're fast tracking this treaty, which is an international binding treaty for plastic. And it's been voted that we should have this treaty by about 175 members of the UN countries. But the problem is, as I see it, that at the negotiations, there's been one round of negotiations so far. They're going to fast track it so it finishes by 2024. In the initial drafts, they were looking to cut worldwide production of plastic. Now, at the moment, I don't know how much you know about it, but there are hundreds of billions of pounds being spent on new plastic plants worldwide. Hundreds of billions of pounds. Plastic production is going to double in the next decade. We're at about 400 million tonnes now. It's going to double. It'll be 800 million tonnes in about 10 years' time. By 2050, it will have quadrupled with current projections. There's going to be more plastic in the oceans than fish, weight for weight, by 2050. The Helen MacArthur Foundation is projecting that. The problem with the negotiations is plastic is made from fossil fuels. The fossil fuel lobby are very, very powerful and very economical with the truth, it has to be said too. And they are dominating. The UN is a representation of governments. Governments are also pretty much dominated by the fossil fuel lobby. So they've taken out from the original drafts reductions in production. They just want to have better recycling facilities. We've known about plastic in the ocean since the 1960s, in deep sea oceans, we've known this. And we're in a limbo where the industry says we're going to have better ways of using plastic, better recycling. In the future, we're going to have pilot schemes, we're going to bring it in. But it never happens, it never gets better, it just gets worse and worse and worse. Now, most NGOs are not even campaigning for reductions in plastic. If you look on the websites of RSPB or Friends of the Earth, they're saying things like we need better ways of recycling. Yeah, they're talking about that. They're talking about.
Can I just interrupt a second?
Sorry. Yeah.
Forgive me for saying this, but I've got to be on a train shortly.
No problem. Yeah,
Is there a website or something that people can go look this stuff up and get on board?
I can give you some information
so
about it.
Please do. And just give a link to these guys.
We need to be aware of this, and we need to be right.
No,
Totally
we
get
heard you.
it. Absolutely,
Okay.
totally get it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I just pick up on this latest question
Yeah,
briefly? Johnny has heard me tell the story. And I appreciate that you're sitting in Ramsgate thinking, well, I'm one person and I've got one tiny little voice in a big, complicated thing. I grew up in this really strange household where both of my parents were massively politically motivated, both deeply involved in the civil rights movement. As 10 years old, I sat in my kitchen watching the local housewife, my mother, who did kids, the local bricklayer, the local electrician, the local school teacher, the local unemployed, sit and discuss public disobedience, rebellion and dissent, and trying to figure out how the hell we were going to bring down the national government in Northern Ireland because of injustices that they had perceived. And at 10 years old, I watched firsthand the local housewife, the local electrician, the bricklayer, the plumber, the unemployed bring down the bloody government in Northern Ireland simply because they realised they had a voice, they raised it, they shouted to the rooftops, and they made it happen. You have the same opportunity right now. Use that time wisely.
Perhaps we should just not pay our bills, because that's going to hit them.
Yeah.
If everyone does it, it's huge.
That will have a very negative effect on credibility.
Yes. The credit rating effect, I think, is one of the things that worries people, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's my biggest
What?
concern.
It is a difficult one because I think we can all agree that it would be good if we all joined together and didn't pay our bills and hit them in their pocket. But it needs to get sort of a lot of us doing that together, doesn't it? We're doing it. It needs a national campaign to do that. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I'll stop Matt first, and then I'll come back. Yeah.
It's a little bit like the poll tax riot moment, because the people who did not pay their poll tax were taken to court, etc., etc. But the riot, that was good.
Listen, I'm going to offer you a kind of slight alternative right now. I mean, it's rhetorical questions. And Jenny knows how many people, and I don't need an answer, how many people in this room have actually written a letter to the Chief Executive and the Chairman of Southern Water? I don't need to know. You haven't. Generically, you haven't. Well, what the hell's stopping you? When was the last time you wrote to the MP? And by the way, Jenny and I can actually memorise and dictate verbatim the standardised cut and paste copy reply you're going to get. But you know what? Next week you then write to the Secretary of State, and the week after that you write to the bloody Prime Minister. And then you go back to the start and you keep going and you keep going and you keep going. The biggest thing you can do right now is nothing. And that's the biggest insult that you can possibly do right now. You've got opportunities, and it does not involve going to prison or having your credit rating destroyed for the rest of your life. There's an enormous amount you can do should you choose to do it. So I'm now clearly expecting, first thing Monday morning, the Chief Executive of Southern Water is going to wake up and there's going to be 120 new letters on his desk going, what the hell are you doing? You're an outrage and a disgrace.
Yeah.
And all your friends' letters as well.
Great.
Yeah, and I've actually got the new Chief Executive of Southern Water, the newish. I've got his email and address that I can pass on to him. I have written to him a couple of times.
He's retiring soon.
Not again.
He's already retired.
Yeah.
Much letters?
Yeah.
I'm fantastic. SOS Festival. I was kind of key in organising the SOS RC, Safe RCs for Ramsgate. I think there's a lot of people here. We all know, we're all swimmers, yes. So we I felt as though we were a bit fobbed off after we'd done a lot of work with Southern Water, and we got a public meeting, and then we now have a stakeholder meeting, which is every 3 or 4 months online. And in a sense, referring to what you were saying, Feargal, writing again to Southern Water, writing to everybody you possibly can, including Craig, as many letters as you possibly can. And I was also going to say there's also Lisa Collingwood at the TDC. She is the Coastal Environment Manager. She is very open to any responses from us, but she is the person who is organising this stakeholder group meeting. So Southern Water have slipped through the net, and it's the TDC that are organising. Now, it's going to be a talking shop, but if you were all to write to Lisa, so she actually has to respond to at the stakeholders group meetings, the Environment Agency is there. Also,
Southern Water and various other people. And we've got various people in this room who signed up to be on that meeting, but it's going to be a bit of a damp squeeze as far as I can
So
see.
the uninitiated TDC.
Thanet.
Sorry, yeah.
Let me try something a second.
Yeah, so thank you very
Water
much.
companies have been playing this game for 40 years. They're really good at it. It's what a friend of mine refers to as consensual invasion. We're all on the same side. This is terrible. We're really sorry. This shouldn't be happening. It's an outrage that these sewage overflows are working. This is absolutely dreadful. Well, let us help you in some way. We're going to organise a meeting. You've let them take control. What the hell did you do that for? So here's the thing, TDC, I'm really sorry, but you've got no influence on any of this. The only people that actually matter right now is the Secretary of State, number 10 Downing Street, the House of Lords, and the Board of Southern Water. So unless you've got some way to influence all of those people, we're really sorry, TDC, I'm busy that day, I'm washing my hair, the day you're having your online meeting. Now here's the thing, if everybody in this room was to write to the chairman of Southern Water Monday morning and go, we demand, we're going to have a bloody public meeting and you better turn up. Or we would go to every length, we'd get all of our friends to start rubbishing your country. The point I'm making is stop responding to their agenda. You create the strategy, you drive it, you manage it, you're in control, not them. What the hell have you let them take control for?
I hate to disagree with Feargal, who is the most amazing guy, but don't bother writing to the House of Lords, because the political parties there, not the Greens, but the other political parties, they all are dictated to by the national parties. So if you're going to target, to make sure that the House of Lords is on side. The House of Lords hates all this legislation. We're full of lawyers and former judges and so on. They absolutely loathe the fact we keep breaking the law, essentially. So, write to the national parties, write to Keir Starmer, write to Rishi Sunak. Is he still Prime Minister?
Today.
And I actually can't remember who's the Lib Dem. Who's the Lib Dem? Is it? Yeah, Ed someone. So write to the national parties, because they dictate what happens in the House of Lords. Just a small correction there.
Happily corrected.
I have a question.
Yes, there. Monica.
So, what do Southern Water need to change for them to be able to stop releasing the sewage into the sea and the rivers? And if they were to start making that change tomorrow, how long would it take to implement? Are we talking a whole digging up?
All right. Here's where we are. Forgive me for a little bit of context, which I hope you'll find helpful. Just over a year and a half ago, Ofwat, the regulator, wrote 2 letters to the water companies. You can go look them up. Just Google sewage overflows letters Ofwat. The first letter, and this was all in response to the increasing pressure and the fact that the House of Lords were getting increasingly vocal about what was being uncovered. And the first letter was in reality the regulator trying to cover its own corporate ass. And the first letter reminded the water companies that they have a legal obligation under Section 94 of the Water Industries Act 1991 to build, operate and maintain sewage systems capable, and I'm quoting, of effectively dealing with the contents of those sewers. So what the regulator is telling the water industry, doesn't matter what's in the sewer, doesn't matter whether it's rainwater or your garden hose water or sewage, if it's in the sewer, that's the business you're in, that's the job government has given you, that's what you signed up to do as a sewage company, you have to deal effectively with the contents of those sewers. They then wrote another letter about 6 months later, going, oh, by the way, in our opinion as the regulator, you've had all the funding you needed for 30 years to go and do that job, to meet all of your legal obligations, including building, operating and maintaining a sewage system capable of effectively dealing with the sewers. So as it turns out, for 30 years we've been paying these sewage companies.
Yeah.
And clearly they haven't spent it on the bloody sewage system. They've pocketed the money.
Which is why I say don't pay them anymore.
I agree with you. Now here's the thing. The question you're asking is, how do we move forward? As we speak, and I'm saying this very generically, there may be certain sensitivities around the financial management of Thames Water, Southern Water, Portsmouth Water and Yorkshire Water. In case you're not aware of it, not a year ago, slightly over it, Southern Water was sold to Macquarie. Macquarie had to step in and put the better part of £1 billion worth of cash into the company because it needed the money. Thames Water, according to the FT about a year ago, had to put £1.5 billion into Thames Water because it needed the money. Within the last 3 or 4 months, the regulator, finally getting its act together, had to order the owners of Yorkshire Water to transfer £980 million back into the company that they offshored, leaving the company teetering on the verge of all kinds of weird things. So where we are right now, the law actually allows for the Secretary of State to pass what is called an enforcement order. Now, the Secretary of State can do that Monday morning. And that's a clear legal instruction to the water companies. You're now faced with a choice. You can now actually start going bankrupt over the next few years, or you can now start working and doing exactly what we're going to tell you. We're going to create a schedule of works. It's going to take 10 or 15, 20 years. We know it's going to take time, but this is exactly what you're going to pay your chief executives. And if you think another one is about to get another £5.9 million salary, which one of them was paid last year, you're insane. If you think you're about to pay out all these billions of pounds worth of dividends and interest every year, you're insane. You're going to pay down all of the debt. Water companies right now are carrying £60.2 billion worth of debt. Yeah. So we are going to come up with a restructuring package for the next 10, 15, 20 years. During that point, you will fix the sewage system. You will actually pay down your debt. And if you're really lucky, in 15 years' time, you'll end up with a company that is vibrant, successful, profitable, and outward-looking. The only thing that's actually missing in the conversation, because all of the legislation's there, all of the framework's there, the word that's missing from the whole conversation is leadership, and leadership from government, and that's the bit we don't have. It's all fixable. It just needs somebody with the wherewithal, the ability, desire, and ambition to do it. Think about that for the next level.
There's only one thing I would add, and that is that they should pay to clear up the mess that they've created already. And with Nick today down at Feargal Bay, it was quite obvious that they're not clearing up the mess there. And so something that perhaps we should be, or you should be lobbying the council, is to chase them to make sure that that SSSI, which is so precious and so damaged at the moment, ought to have some clean-up, and it should be from the water companies.
Yeah, so I'm litter picking. I do a lot of litter picking on the coast. We often think of cans and bottles and barbecues, but it's not. It's Southern Water, tampon applicators, packets from tablets. We find cat's eyes washing off the road, loads and loads and loads of plasters. And I'm picking this up endlessly off the beach. This is all coming down our sewers. Floss hearts. And to top it off, the favourite thing I often find down the beach is people's false teeth. and no one's putting it out apart from volunteers.
So there are... Yeah, go on, yeah.
I just wondered, can I assume then, so Labour are keen on renationalising?
No.
They're not.
No.
They're not.
The Green Party is not Labour.
Yeah. The Green Party is not Labour, but they need to clear up their mess and their bills before we, subsidising what the mess they've made there. Yes. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. And I was going to add that as Feargal and Jenny alluded to, there are things that our council can do. There are things we can put more pressure on Southern Water to clean up Feargal Bay and other areas around the coast. We can stop making it worse, because we all agree it's pretty obvious. The infrastructure is out of date. That's both the sewage infrastructure and the infrastructure delivering water to our houses. It's out of date and it isn't up to capacity. And we, as a council, one way or another, are making it worse as we carry on granting permission for more large housing estate developments across the area. So that, while we might not be able to, as a council, improve the infrastructure, Southern Water have got to do that, but we can stop making it worse. So we need as a council to say no more approvals for large housing developments until Southern Water have upgraded their infrastructure and can deliver a service that's fit for purpose for the current residents and businesses. So as we don't... I'll come to Claire first, because I know Claire, in Whitstable, you've done similar, haven't you?
Yeah, I was going to say, because the local plan was out for consultation recently, and there were sort of 31,000 houses included in that, and there's massive amounts of building that they want to, the Tory Council is proposing over the next, till 2045. And we said, well, we don't want to see any more, our line is, we don't want to see any more developments until they've sorted out this sewage issue, because that's, you know, was it 1,000 swimming pools full of sewage we sort of estimated that's going to be. We had a petition about that which got over 1,000 signatures, so we're still pushing on that. So yeah, I think you're right. No, we can't keep building houses at the rate they want to keep us building houses when we're already overflowing. It's just not feasible.
Okay, Alan.
So I was just going to say that this is not the only council, this is not the only area that's suffering from the same problem. A massive house building, this government has falls through. So we all seem to operate as individuals, and so why don't the council contact other councils that have the same problem, and they all contact the Secretary of State and say, finished, we are building it. If everybody does that, then you're not going to be taken to court and overturned and fined. Because when you contact the council now, their excuse is always, not us, it's the government. Not us, it's the government. That's what the council tells you. There's a disgusting reaction to it, my view, when they should be representing their constituents and saying, well, no, we'll back you on this, and that's what needs to be done. So people get together at once, and actually you get all the councils, all the district councils together, all over the country, because they're all in the same boat, they're all in the same problem.
It's not enough pushing back,
I mean, so as I say, all over the country, they hear how people chasing
Not that I would ever wish to coach you in these things, which I'm not clear about today. You may want to go and spend some time looking up with nutrient and phosphate loading and the Habitats Directive and Natural England and the guidance they've now given to councils, particularly on protected areas like SSIs, and a number of councils, particularly in the West Country, are now introducing moratoriums on any further development unless the developers can confirm and make sure that there will be no further nutrient load on those developments that will in any way increase the nutrient load on SSIs. Well, there you go. Give you something to do for the weekend.
I mean, that is something that we, Thanet Green councillors, have been pushing for. We've tried to we have proposed motions at council asking them to call in Natural England and the Environment Agency, so as we can ask them questions about why they aren't doing what they should be doing.
Johnny, let me just be clear on this. Natural England has already issued the guidance. The question you need to ask the council is, there is the guidance issued by Natural England. You cannot be adding to the nutrient load on protected areas, so what are you doing to implement and abide by Natural England's guidance? There's the question you need to ask.
Right. So that's the question we're going to be asking.
And I'll be back next week to make sure you've asked.
Part of the problem we have, though, in fairness, is that when the planning committee turns things down, what happens is the developer appeals to the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State says, you're fine.
Yes.
There are a number of... I was just going to say, Feargal, we are still looking for candidates.
Got a couple of spaces.
I mean, we are told that the numbers. I mean, our local plan was approved a couple of years ago, and there are numbers of 17,000 houses to be delivered. But that shouldn't be just a blank cheque to say, right, any of the applications that come forward on the sites in the plan have to be approved. They have to meet. We should be saying you have to meet these standards. The ones that Feargal's outlined that we're going to be writing about within the week. And And all the other policies that we've got in the local plan. Yeah. We shouldn't be giving every developers a blank cheque.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a thought that comes to me. That, I mean, it would seem so sensible if there was a class action, perhaps against the Secretary of State, from all councillors, or if there were, you know, maybe if the Green Party, I don't know, I mean, I'm just being hypothetical, but that it seems to me that the only way that actually the government can be forced to behave and to do its role, because that's what it is, to protect the people. And it seems to me that this last 12 years has only been ever more about profits to the cronies, with zero responsibility and zero care. So, right, there needs to be, it seems to me, a class action taken on the basis of the impact to people's health, which then is being impacted on a deteriorating National Health Service. Yeah. You know, I mean, there's an entire degradation of ours, of the society, yeah, of the UK, and the Tories seem to be just intent on rescinding their responsibility to anything other than profiteers, it seems to me. So it seems to me that there needs to be a national class action that actually then could force the government to have to take action. I don't think it can't be piecemeal. It's got to be a national class action.
As we speak, there are 4 cases that I am aware of currently queuing up to take government to judicial review in the High Court. One of which is a charity which I have the pleasure of being Honourable Vice President of, is Wild Fish, and we were granted permission by the High Court to take government to judicial review. That is one of many. These things do take time, but I can assure you right now there are at least 4 that I personally am aware of that are now in the queue and in various stages of the process. The first one that's going to break probably will be Wild Fish, and we're waiting for a date later in the year to take government to the High Court. I'll keep you updated with the progress we make. But you are right, that is one of the tools at our disposal, and we have to utilise it. Completely.
Are you? Becky at the back.
I just want to know what Mike said. I'm one of the 4 Greens, and me and Mike sit on planning. And one of the first things you can do is actually log on and listen to a planning meeting go ahead, because you'll find that very few councillors actually challenge. And I think the lady from Whitstable said there's not enough pushing back. It's quite clear to me. I mean, I've never been involved in politics until now, but we can't sit by and let things happen. We haven't got the leadership, so we've got to change our communities from the bottom up. That's what we have to do. So watch those planning meetings, see who's speaking. You know, I'd love you to vote Green, but if I'm being honest, look at your candidates, check who is going to represent you as a person rather than their party. The housing numbers, the mythical equation for housing numbers is beyond me. Thanet District Council did its own bit of research on our population growth in Thanet, and up to 2040 it's 10%, mainly driven by the over 65s, so we should be building care homes and bungalows. At 17,100 homes represents a 25% increase in Thanet housing stock. If we get the extra 4.5, and I hope we don't, that's 32%. All those people are drinking water, shitting and weeing, and we've got a system that can't cope as it is. But also, if you drive along the Hay Road, 6 months ago, it was farmland, porous farmland. Me and Mike sat on a planning meeting where the Tom Horton restaurant's gone, the last green wedge in West Woodless Cross, was described as only grass and usually covered in litter by the chair. I pointed out that I found it quite disrespectful that you were describing a habitat, a porous habitat. The whole of the Hay Road is going to be covered in non-porous buildings and tarmac, that he's just going to contribute to the surface water that Southern Water keeps blaming for these discharges. So please, get active. Really have a look at who your candidates are. Put them under pressure. Ask them the question, what are they going to do to save our environment? Because there is a groundswell, there is a cross-party groundswell, isn't there, Mike?
There is.
People now beginning to listen. We pushed the planning application back, 2 greens, 2 reds and 2 blues. We got some stick from some of the other committee members, but we said we're doing this because we're fed up with people rubber stamping developments, and we need to send a message to our planning officers and also the developers to think again. The Shottenden Lane thing was that was lost, but 2 other developers rethought their plans as a consequence of that massive pushback by local people. So we have to get active. It's got to start from the ground up because it's not coming from the top down.
Thank you, Becky. There are opportunities coming up actually to make our voices heard to Southern Water. As a result of the water outages recently, we have, as a council, invited Southern Water senior executives along to the council to answer questions from us about that. Now that, some of you, and Feargal might say, well, that's not going to achieve a great deal, but it is an opportunity for all of us to show up outside the council offices and let them know personally what we feel about what they're doing, both about the water outages.
Yes. No lynching.
No. Verbal. So that's due to occur in Cecil Square, the council offices, on the 14th of March.
Is it a public meeting?
It is a public meeting. Yeah, I mean it is a public meeting, and there will be an opportunity for members of the public to speak. They will be told you can only speak for 6 minutes, but if there's a volume of public they're wanting to speak, the chair isn't that vociferously able to stop you. But the other thing Feargal and others have mentioned about getting their chief executive down for a public meeting. Well, there is a petition that's live at the moment that was arranged by a lady called Liz Larvin. It's got 850 signatures on it at the moment. If you haven't seen it, change.org, if you look up Liz Larvin on there, please all sign that as well, and let's get that ball rolling to get more people, to get a public meeting going. It isn't good enough just councillors talking to them. They need to be facing all of us to answer these questions. So, is there anybody else who has? Yeah, over.
There's been a lot of talk about sewage.
Yeah.
No one's talked about drugs that are also within sewage. Yeah. And also, the one that really upsets me more than all the rest of it is the pathogens. I mean, some pathogens live up to 5 years. Salmonella, 5 years in water. We've got a whole host of those things. We need to deal with it now. Yeah. And it's going to take 5 years minimum to put it right.
Listen, let me just deal with this quickly. There is an enormous array of pan-European legislation in place in this country whilst before the retained EU law bill sunsets and gets rid of it all. God help me, I actually know this. You can start with the urban wastewater treatment regulations 1994, quickly move on to 694, the Water Industry Act 1991. Sewage is nasty, horrible, dangerous stuff, which is why there's all these laws about the collection, treatment, and disposal of it. And regardless of what the nice lady from Southern Water says about it being 95% water, by the way, I can prove a word of that. For the record, by the way, my challenge still stands. I am happy to donate £1,000 of my money personally to a charity chosen by the Chief Executive of Southern Water, should he decide that he's prepared to drink a glass of water that I choose from a sewage overflow of his company. Let me remind you all, sewage is full of pathogens, carcinogenics, heavy metals. It is lethal, dangerous stuff, which is why we have the laws we do. And let me remind the Chief Executive of Southern Water, feces is up to 92% water. Nobody's going to suggest I make my tea with it or I should bathe in it.
Thank you. Okay,
Can I add one thing?
yeah, sure.
Sorry, our next thing that we are working on, which I'm partly here to talk to people about on the platform, is a lobby of Parliament, which we think we should just all converge there one day, demand all the MPs and lords and so on sign up to the campaign, because we're just trying to think of ways that we can keep mobilising. And I bet you could all take half a day off and come along. And if we did that all over the place, it would be enormous.
Listen, if we're getting to that point in the evening, again, I don't want to coach you people, because I'm just the kind of...
You're a good coach.
Somebody mentioned kind of action earlier on. I'm afraid and I know I referred to it earlier on, I grew up in a house, my father padlocked himself to the mayor of Derry's chair in the middle of a council meeting. So you want direct action? I kind of watched my parents write the handbook on that idea. We will, at some point over the next year and a half, 2 years, have a general election. Thanet is going to be a contentious seat. We all know it, that's the way it is. So my question, and I don't need an answer, it's a rhetorical question, there is a massive opportunity for the people in this room. Because there is going to be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, God knows how many candidates want to get elected in this. There's going to be national attention on Thanet. What are you guys going to do to make sure that when those candidates put in their papers, they know they're going to be held accountable, that you guys have got it organised, strategised. They will know you have to sign up to our ambitions, to our belief, to the goals that we want. Otherwise, we will do everything we can to make sure you will never be elected the MP for Thanet. That's what you've got to achieve for the next year, year and a half. If I can do something to help, please let me know.
Okay, I'll open the floor. Yeah.
I don't know who created that wonderful banner, but it's so attractive. My eyes keep getting drawn to it. And then I realise that, of course, I'm looking at 3 turds. But when you're standing on the cliff and you're looking at this beautiful view that people have been looking at for 150 years and being cured by it, of mental health and getting the ions off the sea and everything. It's difficult, even now when you look out there, to recognise that the damage is underneath. And it's the fact that we can't see underneath that is allowing these people to get away with doing this outrage, you know? And it's not the ship. I'm a sea swimmer, I think it's great, but it's not really about us having a great time paddling around in cold water. It's about the damage to the environment. Yeah. And all this, the real shit that's going in there, of course, is the bleach and the washing up liquid, and all the terrible chemicals. And in a sense, you know, the more you worry about shit in the sea, the more bleach you want to put down the toilet. But it really is affecting the fish stocks. And if we can't eat the fish, having come out of Europe, where the government was saying that we're going to get our fish back, and there isn't any. It's just absolutely that we're destroying the fish, and the local fishermen confirmed that his catch is like negligible.
Oh, Mr. Chair, all of it has an impact, but for me, it goes back to that philosophical thing, and this is not a party political broadcast. The simple truth of the matter is, political leadership in this country has been woefully lacking, if not negligent, if not absent for at least the last 12 years. That's why none of this is working, why none of it's fixable. It all can be done, but it's going to clearly take a government with the wherewithal, the ambition, the determination to fix it and make it better. And after that, it just means somebody just taking the lead and getting on with it. That's all we're missing. Leadership. A single word. Leadership. If you want 2 words, leadership and hope. That's it for those.
And encourage people to stop being in denial about what's really going on there.
Oh, this night.
It's easy to be in denial because, you know, these things can be very painful to face up to. And it's easier to pretend that they're not happening. And I think a lot of people are doing that.
Listen, I can only speak from personal perspective right now. When I sat on my sofa 5, 6 years ago with nobody on Twitter paying a word of attention to anything I had to say, and not a week ago I found myself 7 o'clock in the morning on Good Morning Great Britain, and the phones just lit up and the place went mental. I can tell you right now, and I know government feel I'm being disruptive in the water industry. You know what? It's over. We've won. That's it. Because people out there now care, they're angry, they're fed up, they're outraged, and they've had enough of it, and it's now going to change. So stop being the government, stop being the water industry, because clearly people are not going to allow you to turn up with Southern Water and basically bullshit some public meeting and then swanning off, treating everybody with contempt. It's done. It's finished.
We've got, in Parliament, we have a lot of APPGs, which are associations of party political groups. It's absolutely amazing. We cover all sorts of issues, and one of them is called the Ocean APPG. And I was in a meeting recently, and they were coming up with all sorts of high-tech ideas about how they could capture. The ocean is a huge carbon sink. It operates on its own. We can help it by doing all sorts of seagrass planting and so on. But they had all these high-tech ideas about releasing stuff from clouds and so on. And I was sitting there quite quietly at first, and I thought, oh, God. I nearly swore. I said, what we've got to do is stop using fossil fuels. And all the scientists in the room just went, yeah, of course, of course that's the thing we have to do. And the Tory at the table said, I cannot ask my residents to stop flying. So that was her immediate go-to response, We have to stop using fossil fuels. There is no way around it. And to some extent, all of these things are linked. I can understand people who lose hope, though. As Feargal's absolutely right. We do need hope. And even I, walking down a street sometimes, I see vast swathes of plastic that the shops are putting outside for recycling and so on. You think, how are we going to change things when, me and my partner, every single little thing, is put into a bag and put in the right one. And so people can lose hope. So when we do collective actions, that gives hope to other people, definitely, and it shows them the way forward. So, work together.
Yeah.
No to fossil fuels.
Yeah. One of the things that always concerns me is, I can't remember how many years ago it was now, on March with Hugh Foley witness stall on this issue with oceans and protected areas, zones. These things go on. People need to keep the momentum going, because they start to wane, they start to disappear. Hugh Foley goes off and does another TV programme, and everybody that supported it just seems to melt away, and so the zones disappear, and the seabeds are still scraped and ruined by deep sea trawling.
Yeah.
People really have to stick at this, and really have to support this.
Well, listen, I can only speak from my own personal perspective. I retired 10 years ago. I was really happy minding my own business, standing in the middle of my little river with, trying to catch a little 6-inch wild brownie. If you haven't figured it out already, when I kind of decide to do something, I don't give up. I've never done that in my life. And I've not a bone I have in my body that allows me to do that. So, personally speaking, I'm going till this is fixed. And if you lot want to carry on behind me or stand beside me, that's good. But either way, one way or another, I'm going until they get it fixed. Just so you know.
That's all I'm saying. We need to do that. We need to stand.
There you go. Please.
Thank you. Hopefully, is there someone? Yeah. Yes.
Could I just say something? I know that you spoke earlier about people coming together, and there is a big action proposed to circle the Houses of Parliament on the 21st of April. That's run by Extinction Rebellion. They're trying out a different tactic, which is not stopping, traffic or blocking roads, etc., not causing the public disruption. But we need you to join us, because we really need people from all different groups, all different walks of life, to come and say, if you don't want to be disrupted, then come and stand with us. We're not disrupting, but we are making a statement, and we're going to be surrounding the Houses of Parliament. It's the 21st, and it goes on for several days, so please come and join us.
You do know that one side of Parliament's all water.
Sorry?
Surrounding part.
Yeah, well, yeah. There are ways around. There are ways around.
The Brits Rise, and Thomas's Hospital.
Yes, Vaughan is in Thomas's Hospital.
Good for you, yes. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. You just
So we had to come together. So yeah, I really, really hope to see you all there.
Is that St George's? I think that's St George's Day. That's
Is
quite
it?
a good day to do it.
Yeah.
23rd.
Yeah.
So
Well, 21st it starts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a simple Blue Peter sort of thing. I'm sure it happened years ago when people returned things to a company that they weren't happy with. What if we did that? Some things we'd have to make it that would health-wise safely, but you can get you can put a certain size of parcel into your letterbox without postage, and it gets sent to the company, and sometimes they have to pay for that or have to return it. And if we return certain things to something like plastic
Things
or
like that.
little brown,
Yeah.
Or the contents of your.
just
all the stuff that Nick had there in his box.
and just say this is what I found on the thing, this is what your dumping trail was, and just if everyone did it, once a week, you don't have to put your name, you can put, we're sick of it, making
Sounds like the results of the next litter pick.
Yeah.
On Feargal Bay at the end of
It's
April.
a simple thing, but if they start getting bags and bags of shit, well not shit, but like stuff.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, there's a litter pick tomorrow at Feargal Bay if you want to, by Kent Wildlife Trust. If you want to go and see it with your own eyes. Tomorrow.
Great.
Steve?
I can't remember.
If anyone's over the age of, I think it's 55, may have been contacted by the bowel cancer screening program, will we send a sample back through the post?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Is there anybody else who wants to? Oh, I've asked about Dominic. Yeah.
Yes, I was going to say thank you for this meeting. You've been fabulous. Someone was going to stand for the Green Party in the May election for local runs, and they're still on the doorstep. And they talked about the housing, and they talked about the water. I've given my vote to Mike. And so with thousands upon thousands. Single issue elections, that's how they won. That's how Boris won in the last election. Get Brexit done. Never mind all the other social problems of, crime not being solved and all that. Forget all that. Just this one single thing. And maybe it might work. So just maybe think about that. That's an idea. Thank you to the Lord.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There are actually a number of us here who will be standing on quite a large number of doorsteps over the next few months with just that message about stopping the housing developments until we're ready for any new houses. That's not going to be a long time. As you said, need 10, 15 years work before our infrastructure is up to scratch. So if I can't see
That
anyone
doesn't
else.
mean no housing, by the way.
No,
it
it
means
doesn't.
housing on brownfield sites. It means affordable housing for local people. We're totally committed to that. We're not saying don't house people who need housing because we've got a desperate housing crisis in Thanet. We mean none of the millionaires' row houses on agricultural land.
Exactly, and there are, in fact, if you add up all the Airbnbs, if you add up all the second homes that are in, and the other empty properties, there are over 5,000 homes sitting across Thanet that aren't homes for people.
How many people waiting on the housing list?
And there's less on the waiting list. So I think I'm going to wind up now and thank everybody for coming. And thank especially Jenny and Feargal for coming down. It's been really quite inspiring. Feargal says he's going to keep on until we get something done. And all these people in here, I think, are now more inspired to stand up for the right thing and get something done. So just this meeting has grown the group of people who stand with you and everybody else who wants change. And I do also want to thank the modern boulangerie for having fantastic new boulangerie in Ramsgate that I would recommend when you're next in Ramsgate. So thank you all very much for coming.
One thing, sorry.
Go on, Monica.
Can you let us, you talked a lot about things we can do, like specific things.
Yeah.
Could you just tell us somewhere where maybe we could look tomorrow afternoon that's just going to list those? Because I can't remember all of them. You were just saying writing letters, and then there'd be templates, and also current petitions that were open. Just list a couple of things we could do, and then I can share that. And
okay.
We can send some stuff around.
We can send some stuff around.
If you're on the event list, we can send you loads of stuff around.
You're on
Might
the
not be tomorrow though, Monica. Okay.
Sometime in the next few days.
That's fine,
And we'll put it up on our Thanet Green's Facebook page.
Yes.
Facebook group, okay?
Yeah.
But,
and anybody can join our Facebook group. You don't have to be Green Party. You've just got to be interested in green issues.
okay. So thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you.